Welcome to Laptop Radio. Today's topic is Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation 2021 Deliberation. And we have Tom Gustafson with us. He is the former Florida House Speaker. Hello, Tom.
How are you, Michelle?
I am good. Where are you now?
I'm in the city of Wellington in Florida, which is on the west side of Palm Beach County, just on the opposite side of the county from Mar-a-Lago.
Awesome. Tell us your story, Tom.
I've had an active life both in politics, in the practice of law, in academia. I retired in February of this year. Have been sitting at home watching COVID and toxic politics take over our nation. I had been working for several years on climate change and related issues, and have finally been able to work through some things that might be done in 2021 and 2022 that might make a difference.
Let's chat a little about the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and you call that UNFCCC. Let's just talk about the history of climate change.
Well, in 1992 in Rio, they reached an agreement that climate change was a problem that would face the planet and its inhabitants. And if it was not addressed and the temperature kept rising, then we would all die. I mean, that's what they concluded in 1992. Mm-hmm. So they set up this framework convention to meet annually to try to figure out what to do about it. What specific actions could they take to change the course of the warming? All of which over time became very clear that it was due to the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which tended to, like a blanket, keep the planet warmer than it had been for the last 10,000 years. Mm-hmm. And that's because though carbon dioxide is a natural gas, it was being produced in larger quantities based upon the development of nations, including starting with the Industrial Revolution in England, and certainly accelerating in the USA in the last century, mm-hmm. and now accelerating in China this century. But in each case, as a nation grew in prosperity, they used fossil fuels. That combined with conventional farming techniques and other attributes of modern life, we were putting a whole bunch of carbon in the atmosphere. We're ready to double the amount of carbon and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere over the next couple decades. And when we do that, we'll warm the planet and exterminate all life on Earth. So the issue is, can we agree globally through the UNFCCC treaty, which was adopted by the first President Bush and approved by the US Senate? Can we act soon enough to avert that kind of disastrous outcome? Mm-hmm. So that's the question. And they've been having meetings annually. They haven't gotten very far. Every time they have a conference of the party, it's called a conference of the party 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're up to 26. Mm-hmm. So they've had 26 of these COPs coming up. The COP 26 is scheduled for Glasgow, Scotland, mm-hmm. November 1st through the 12th of 2021. And they'll deliberate again. But now those deliberations will include some very specific directions that were born out of the Paris Agreement, which was reached in 2015. And those are the items being deliberated in Glasgow next year that will make a decision, mm-hmm. we hope, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and other strategies that will cool off the planet, limit the warming, and save mankind and womankind.
So how serious is the challenge?
Oh, it's as serious as a heart attack. In fact, 7 billion heart attacks. It's as serious as you get. If we raise the carbon and greenhouse gases to a point where the Earth begins to emit its own greenhouse gases, and we can't stop it, that's called a runaway climate change, then we've just killed ourselves. So that's how serious it is. Exactly when that's likely to happen, no one quite knows, but we're getting close. We're getting towards the edge. And if we don't slam on the brakes, it's good night, Irene.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, how much time do we have left?
Everybody does, and we have no time left. We are approaching the edge of the Grand Canyon. We're in the car, the Thunderbird with the two ladies from that famous movie. And if you don't apply the brakes very, very quick, you'll probably go over the cliff into the Grand Canyon and die. There is no more time. That's clear as a bell. Every scientist who does the work knows that. Is it today? Is it tomorrow? Is it next year? It is immediately, by whatever term you want to define that term. Immediately, we got to stop greenhouse gas emissions, or we will likely die.
What can we do to stop it?
Well, there's thousands of things. There's a nice book out that goes through them. I'm going to think of it in just a moment, but it doesn't come to mind as I mention it. But there are a number of books out there on climate that go through any thousands of things you can do. Don't drive your car, even if it's electric, because building that car, they had to emit carbon. Don't drive a car. Don't get into jet aircraft. Jet aircrafts produce lots of greenhouse gases. Don't eat meat, at least until all cattle are fed on a combination of seaweed ingredients that keep their methane down. There's lots of things you can do. Change out your air conditioning so as to minimize the amount of emissions from air conditioning, from electricity, from the gas that is in the refrigeration equipment that leaks into the atmosphere. Again, thousands of things to do, but none of them matter unless the whole world does it together. And that requires them to deliberate in Glasgow, pursuant to the Paris Agreement, and reach commitments that will globally reduce greenhouse gases rapidly so that we can avoid disaster. It's going to take a global change. So the real answer to your question is, if 7 billion people make plans to go to Glasgow and refuse to leave until the global leaders made a decision, that would be something that would get people's attention and maybe get them to act accordingly. I have to just deviate for a moment. What is a global leader? By definition, he or she is a sociopath. They would never have got elected to lead their nation or be able to secure power through a strongman play to lead their nation unless they were sociopaths or something close to it. So why would a sociopath make the right decision? They never make the right decisions. They're too selfish. They're narcissistic. They don't care about others by definition. If global leaders are, by and large, or at least some percentage of them, sociopaths, the only way you get them to change their mind and behave themselves is if they realize their doom is immediate, that they themselves are threatened, that they won't get reelected, that they will be overthrown, that their country will be in ashes before their eyes. Unless the threat is immediate, sociopaths don't tend to do the right thing. So we're going to have to figure out, as a world population, how to manage our global leaders so they make the right and rational decision. It's a very tough decision to make, and sociopaths are not likely to make it without a great deal of encouragement.
So let's talk a little about the global encouragement. You mentioned 7 billion people. How do we get 7 billion people to be together?
Well, we had a climate game we were going to develop to do that at FIU before I retired, but we couldn't get financing, so that didn't get done. Certainly, Greta Thunberg has done a wonderful job of motivating the strikes every Friday on a global basis, and they hold out some help that people acting globally will cause their global leadership to act in a reasonable way. Certainly, the election of Joe Biden is a good thing. He was for the Paris Agreement and for moving forward. He's named as the government's lead representative for the Paris Agreement, the former Secretary of State, John Kerry. And that's a good thing. We'll get back in the game and hopefully be a force for good in global negotiations and deliberations over the Paris Agreement. So all those things are good. But in the end, literally 11 months from now, the thermostat of the planet will be adjusted. Now, if it's adjusted to 2.0, the world will be saved. If it's adjusted to 1.5, all nations of the world will be saved. The difference is at 1.5, probably everybody makes it. Now, after they limit global warming to 1.5, they still have to reduce the temperature to that which we experienced over the last 10,000 years. But if they decide they can't do it, because it takes a lot of effort to do that, then they're probably going to vote to go 2.0.
Mhm.
Now at 2.0, which is also or substantially below 2.0, whatever you want to call it, a whole bunch of Pacific Islander nations don't make it.
Mhm.
A whole bunch of African equatorial nations don't make it.
Mhm.
The Middle East doesn't make it. Mexico doesn't make it. Miami goes away.
Mhm.
Much of your downtown in San Francisco goes away. There's a whole bunch of bad things that happen in a 2.0 or warmer world.
Mhm.
So even if they come to a decision to limit global warming, but it's half-hearted, they're only going to limit it a little bit to say 2.0. Right now, it's likely to be 3.0, which is too high. So if they get it down to 2.0, some of the world makes it and some doesn't. And that's why the importance of 1.5 degrees Celsius being the global limit is as a decision, because we either decide to save all of humanity
Mhm.
or we decide to save some of them. And that's the decision that has to be made in Glasgow, Scotland on November 1st through the 12th, and as long thereafter as necessary for them to make a decision.
In the next 11 months, what are you gonna do?
What am I going to do?
Yes.
Well, some of it I can't talk about
Okay.
because it's still in negotiation, but I'm trying to get, at least in Florida, political leaders to pay attention
Mhm.
that even though, and I want to be blunt, Florida is not a particularly important state and South Florida is not a particularly important region
Mhm.
when looked upon at a global level.
Mhm.
So we're sort of the backwater. We don't really matter much. But if we could somehow speak up loud enough to be heard, it might be meaningful. So I'm trying to encourage, at least at the Florida and South Florida area, for those peoples who have positions of authority to speak up before it's too late. This is a little bit like Horton Hears a Who, Dr. Seuss's children's book, where Whoville was so small they could not be seen or heard. They were likely to be thrown away and destroyed until they chose to speak up together.
Mhm.
If we don't all speak up together and get ourselves heard in Scotland by November 1st through the 12th, it's good night, Irene, for at least South Florida, probably all of Florida,
Mhm.
as the coastal communities collapse under the pressure of sea level rise and hurricanes and wildfires and pandemics and everything else that climate change is going to throw at us.
Mhm. What are a few critical things that we should think about to address climate change in the future?
Well, it's not 7 billion people. It's only about 1 or 2 billion people.
Okay.
5 billion to 6 billion of the people don't produce that much carbon, but the richest billion, trillion, or even 2 trillion do. And so if you want to just speak to Americans, stop getting on planes, stop eating meat, get new air conditioners, put up cellular, keep electing people like Joe Biden because climate is an important issue. And if you live in South Florida or Florida, know that if we get it wrong on November 1st through the 12th of 2021, then there's no hope for us.
Mhm.
The public awareness is the important thing. And people like Greta Thunberg are certainly doing a much better job than I am of raising public awareness. But I'm always surprised when you talk to somebody about it randomly that says, I don't know anything about that. It's all news to me. Well, it's only news to you if you're under a rock or in denial. The climate change that we're looking at becomes inevitable literally this decade unless we immediately begin to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions.
I remember being told that science was not real by one of our presidents and that climate change may not be real. So
He was lying to you. He
how do
was
we
lying to
show
you.
or prove that climate change is real?
Well, look up NASA website on climate. Look up NOAA website. Those are US governmental websites.
Mhm.
And they say climate change is real. It's caused by humans, and we can stop it or certainly slow it down if we would reduce the amount of greenhouse gas we emit. It is well known, well researched, scientifically undeniable fact. It is continued to be broadcasted by NOAA and NASA governmental agencies, even while the current president was telling his supporters that it was not true. And that's because, unfortunately, we had a president We have a president who doesn't tell the truth, doesn't tell the truth about COVID, doesn't tell the truth about climate, doesn't tell the truth about how much money he's putting in his pocket compared to the rest of the nation. So, I mean, I can't do anything. I've already done what I could do. I voted against the current president, and I'm thankful that we have Joe Biden as our new president. But even he may not be able to do the right thing unless there's a whole bunch of people who speak out at the same time that they really want climate change and COVID to be in our rear view mirror and no longer be a threat to the nation. Unless you speak up, you get what you deserve.
I've actually have experienced climate change, and even in California, we have seen fires and orange sky, and then I haven't seen that for so many years. Maybe orange sky for the first time this year, and we've seen and experienced fires. And I think we had snow on the streets even last year when I was driving to Vegas, and that's really different because it's usually in the mountains. It seems like our world is changing, our climate is changing, and I don't think we have that awareness yet where it's collaborative, where it's global and is united, right? I think different people have different views of climate change. So how do we get there? How do we get a more unified, collaborative perspective on climate change?
Well, one is you can tell everybody who doesn't believe in climate change if they believe in gravity. And now, if they don't believe in gravity or climate change, tell them to go to a tall building and jump off of it because gravity obviously doesn't apply to them. And then we can go on and talk to the rest of the planet who does believe in climate change and gravity. There's no way to deal with it except to politely, gently push them aside and move forward in the direction that needs to be done. There will always be people who cannot see the obvious threat to their lives. It's just a human nature thing. So you don't let them prevent you from doing what you know needs to be done in order to save yourself, your family, your community, your nation, your world. There's not enough time to convince the non-believers that it's a threat. There's only time to act despite the inability of a large portion of the world not to see the problem. Now, by the way, when I say that, most of the world does see the problem. The only places that seem to have a problem seeing it are those nations where the national leaders intentionally misrepresent the facts to their nation. That would be true in the US today, and certainly in other non-democratic nations around the world. When national leaders misrepresent the threat, the public gets confused and they make bad decisions.
Yeah, I think accuracy is really important. And to all the listeners out there, please do not jump off of tall buildings or even not so tall buildings because we want your lives. We don't want you to die, of course. It's an interesting year, and we want everyone to have awesome mental wellness as well because we need everyone to be together this year. So with that said, let's talk about raising awareness. Besides doing little things to help with the climate change, how do we even talk about climate change with our friends to actually to raise awareness in that way? Because like how do we have network effects? Because I certainly have a lot of friends. Things that come up are usually, what movie have you seen? Is it even cool to actually mention climate change? How do we even make it cooler? So Tom, if you're my new friend and I say something concerned me, I really care about climate change. How do we even talk about that? Because I think even a lot of young girls and guys, they're into, I'm just thinking about the VSCO girls. There's like this little subculture where people care about the earth and turtle, save the turtles. I feel like there's a lot of people who actually care about the earth and the planet because there's movement about saving the turtles. How do we share that and make that popular? Do we have to make YouTube videos? Do we have to share that on Twitter? Should we just basically help Zoom meetings about that, kind of like social dilemma? How do we do that to raise awareness?
Well, there's plenty of YouTube and other video out there that explains everything you want to know about climate change. All you have to do is Google climate change and take a look at thousands of videos and
Mhm.
hundreds of thousands of scientific journal articles that will get you up to speed. But how do you make it interesting and fun? Well, one of the things is get people interested in what Greta's doing and
Mhm.
tell them all they have to do, is go strike on Fridays for climate. It's
Okay.
an easy thing to do, and it's happening all around the world. And just join the strikes. Wear a mask and keep your social distance, and hopefully survive the climate change strike. But it is important that you get knowledgeable, and to do that, if you look up the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, which was a scientific group directed by the UNFCCC, which is the Convention on Climate Change Treaty. The IPCC was directed to do the research, to consolidate the knowledge of climate, to put out reports periodically. The most interesting ones were put out in 2019. IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which was commissioned by the UNFCCC, the Convention Treaty on Climate. They did the research, certainly aggregated the research that was available. And in reports in 2019 in particular, they came out with 3 or 4 different reports, all of which said what I've been saying, which is we're out of time. We've put too much carbon in the atmosphere. We're going to overheat and die if we don't stop.
Mhm.
So reading those reports and listening to people like Greta Thunberg, who actually read the reports.
Mhm.
So reading is a good thing.
Mhm.
And if you read about it and you understand that there is a certain amount of carbon we can tolerate and we're past that point, then you can be better advocates to your friends. If they just want to be entertained, you can figure out a way to use Galler's humor, as I do, to get their attention. But from my particular point of view, nobody really cares about anybody else other than themselves and their immediate loved ones, and only if they're immediately in danger.
Mhm.
So somehow you have to communicate past that predisposition to ignore long-term risks
Mhm.
and get their attention. Strikes on Friday is certainly one simple thing to do.
If there's a virtual movement of striker, then I would just certainly hop on Zoom and then join the strike virtually.
It's going on all the time, and that's exactly how they're doing many of the strike activities right now. Again, they're striking every Friday and have been for the last year and a half. And again, I'm always surprised when somebody isn't aware of it, because it's pretty out there. But it doesn't get on the daily news every night like it should.
Yeah.
And so we're put to sleep. We got national leaders who don't tell us the truth. So we're being put to sleep. Hopefully people will wake up, but if they don't, we die. So anything you can do to draw attention to the issue is worthwhile.
And that's why I'm asking the very, very hard questions right now so that we could be more aware.
Again, the people that are most organized is the people who strike on Fridays with Greta Thunberg, but there's certainly many other people. So somebody who wants to know, they can Google climate change, and there's literally thousands of websites and videos and source of information to get people up to speed, particularly from NASA and NOAA. But it's easy stuff to understand. The IPCC stuff is a little bit more difficult to read, but if you're of high school education, you ought to be able to get through it. The point is, we're sort of out of time to debate whether it's happening. It's now time to act or die.
Okay, and I guess we need the nations to lead us. And
Well, they're not leading us. The only thing that's going to happen is if hundreds of millions of people take to the street and refuse to leave until the leaders do what they're supposed to do.
okay,
That's what will make a difference. There's some good psychology analysis that's done that if 3% of the people of a nation want something done, if they get out on the street and yell and scream, non-violently, hopefully, then their leaders will pay attention and do what they ask. So what's 3% of 7 billion people? It's a lot of millions of people on the street. And until we get that, the global leaders will think that no one cares, and so they won't act.
all right, I got it. So we basically gotta organize and collaborate and strike
They've already organized. You have to
until the
join what's
leaders.
already been organized. You have to simply join the people that have already woke up, and it's already been done. All you have to do is join them,
Okay, got
add
it.
to their numbers.
So basically, Do a search on Google and see if you can join the voices to get the leaders to listen
Right.
and act.
And the group that's best organized to make a statement that's heard is Greta Thunberg. That's Thunberg. That's how they pronounce it in Sweden, but it's spelled Thunberg, Thunberg, Greta. But she's pretty world famous. And listen to her speeches. And her organization is got several different names, but it deals with the Friday strikes for climate.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to share that I have not asked you?
I had a great Thanksgiving. Did you?
I did. It was a little bit different this year, I must say, because of all we have curfews and all that stuff. I don't know about you. I mean, I'm glad that it's been a crazy year, I must say. Since March or even January, we had the pandemic, which is surprising, and then the shortage of supplies. And then we had fires, and then we had earthquakes. And then we have orange sky, and we had political unrest. It was really interesting. So we really don't know whether we're safe or not. And I'm kind of glad that
we're not safe. We're not safe. We're in grave danger.
But I am at least grateful, though, that it's safer to walk out in the streets than before. I really, before the election, I was told to stock up on food because it might not be safe to actually go out. Climate change is important because I think people don't see it as unsafe because it's in the future, even though it's happening now, and they don't really realize that.
They only don't realize it because no one tells them day in and day out, wake up, you're going to die if we don't change our behavior in the next decade, starting now. I mean, that's the message. It's over and over and over again. You can choose to ignore it. You can choose to say, well, it feels pretty good today. You can live for the day. And those people are okay. It's just that you've got to sort of gently push them aside and reserve your time and conversation with those who will actually take action that's necessary to convince world leaders to reduce climate change.
Okay, awesome. So on November 1st to 12th, 2021, there's going to be a really serious and important meeting among all the leaders about climate change. And
the most important meetings will be occurring before then.
Yes.
Because they just don't show up and make a decision. They've had pre-meetings, but it's scheduled for the 1st through the 12th.
Yes.
But it is expected to last longer than that. So the more people that are in climate strike mode between now and November, the more likely they're going to make the right decision. That's the walnut.
Sounds awesome. Okay. And what is one piece of advice that you have for the community?
One piece of advice, one piece of wisdom.
One piece of advice and one piece of wisdom. It's similar. I mean, I can tell you the difference.
Every time you make a decision on a day-to-day basis, think of its long-term impacts. You'll be a better human being because of it.
That's profound. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.